I would now like to invite the moderator and panelists to the stage for our first panel, Indigenous Women's Rights, Safety and Representation. So I would like to welcome to the stage when they are ready, our moderator, Lisa Helps, and our three panelists, Sage Lacerte, Isabel O'Kanese, and Racelle Kooy. So Racelle may not be here yet, but we are going to begin regardless. So when our panelists and moderators are ready, please have a seat, and we will begin. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me here. I'd like to begin, as I always do when I take the stage or speak publicly, that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and I am humbly a settler here and working very hard in my role as Mayor of Victoria towards decolonization, specifically with the Songhees and Esquimalt nations on whose territory the City of Victoria rests. It's a real honor to be here and moderating the panel discussion on Indigenous women with Indigenous women, very powerful women sitting here beside me. And there may be more panelists joining us, and we'll just make sure that we welcome them into the conversation. So we're just going to begin by asking these two women to introduce themselves, and then each of the panelists has submitted questions, and so we'll use the panelists' questions in the discussion, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Panelists, I am Isabel O'Kanese. I'm Oji from the Turtle Clan. My people come from O'Kanese First Nations in southern Saskatchewan. It's just 3 hours east of Regina. I'm non-status. I don't really know when my family left the reserve, so because it's a big secret. Fortunately, I passed away when my parents passed, so I'm not sure when they left. I'm the founder and organizer of Wenska Decolonize Victoria. Wenska is a Cree word for wake up. Or it's a phrase used to tell children to get out of bed. So it's kind of like telling people to wake up and get out of bed and decolonize. I'm also a small business owner. I provide psychic services, which is, I know, obviously different from social activism. And I was also a radio host in Edmonton. I used to do a radio show there called It Cinnamon. It's still running. I did the show for 12 years, so I was in radio broadcasting for 12 years. And I moved to Victoria 7 years ago. Thank you. Hi.
Hadi, hello. Sage Lacerte Sadney, Loretta Madam Slew, Paula Sir Abba, Sikana Lashabu Injani Kadene, Carrier Dene Kale. My name is Sage Lacerte. I'm a carrier woman. I just did a quick introduction there. So my mother is the late Loretta Madam, and my dad is Paul Lacerte. And so those are the people I learn a lot of things from. So you always want to introduce where you're from, what your intention is, and who your family is. So that's where I come from. I come from the Lake Valley Nation in like north central-ish British Columbia. I'm also a student. I'm a student here at UVic. So I'm in my 4th year in the Gender Studies program, and I also do some psychology work as well. It's been a really good journey in my education and experiential education and community, but also here at UVic. It's been really good, kind of building up my heart and my mind in this amazing space. I'm here as the National Youth Ambassador of the Moose Hide campaign. Has anybody heard of it? Anybody? So my family started the Moose Hide campaign in 2011. My older sister, Raven Lacerte, and my dad, Paul Lacerte, are the co-founders. And they're at home right now, just hanging out, enjoying their weekend, enjoying the summer. And what I do is I do all of the speaking, and I get to kind of spread the word that we are hoping to end violence towards women and children in Canada in many different ways. So we created this initiative to raise awareness, and we primarily engage Indigenous and non-Indigenous boys and men. There's a lot of space for the voice of boys and men surrounding violence towards women and children. And I'm really, really excited to get to have a very intimate conversation with you two today. And yeah, thanks Lisa for being a moderator, and I'm really excited. So let's get going.
Thank you. So we'll start with the 2 questions that each of you have put forward. And as you say, it is a small and intimate panel. So if you feel like you've answered the so-called question and the other person is speaking and you'd like to add something, you can just turn it into more of a conversation and just gesture that you'd like the microphone. So I'll start with Isabel's question, and I think it's a really important question to start with. What are the myths Aboriginal women are safe in Canada? So would you like to start by answering your own question? Because sometimes when we ask a question, we already have some idea, and then I'll hand it over.
Hi, means thank you. I'm saying hi twice. So, feeling emotional that I knew this question. When I thought of this question, I thought, oh no, I'm going to cry. Even I fell for the myths because some of them, especially when I was younger, I thought if I was well educated, was a leader, came from a loving family, was well known, that I would be safe in my own country, and that's actually not true. It's not true at all. If we think of the murdered and missing Aboriginal women, I think the numbers are quite low. They say there's about 1,600 missing Aboriginal women, children, female girls. So, but the statistics for that number is 70% of the women who went missing and some of the female youths that have gone missing or murdered are actually well educated. They have like a university degree or college educated. So having a university degree did not spare them from being murdered or being taken. I'm not part of this family, but Melina Labukan, her sister went missing or was murdered, and she was at a party. She was a young girl who went to university or art design in Toronto, and she went to a party, and there was 5 people in the apartment, and somehow she fell off 27-story balcony. So it's interesting, as an Aboriginal woman, her murderer has not been found, and there's 5 people in the room when she fell. So it's just really odd. And so that's a very good story of how Bella Labukan fit my myths of what to be safe, because her family loved her. I know Melina loves, like, Mrs. Bella a lot. And Melina is well known as an activist throughout the country. Her family is loving. They're well educated, university educated, and they are still a victim of murder in Canada, and there's no justice as of yet. So I thought if when I was younger, before I knew more about the murder and missing of Aboriginal women, I thought if I became safe or made myself safe, that I would be safe. And I don't know if that's true or not. I was homeless for about 15 months, and I didn't tell. Most people did not know I was homeless because I was afraid that well-meaning people who would talk about my circumstances, someone would overhear that conversation and might seek me out. So even running a business, I still became homeless. And I thought, I was like, I need to be angry in order to survive being homeless, so I was very fierce. The other people in the homeless shelter were scared of me, the staff. So they never got to see the very vulnerable person and quiet, soft-spoken, mannered person that I usually am. But I just thought, being homeless, I could not afford people to know. Even my closest friends, most of them did not know. So safety in Canada is very much a concern for all Aboriginal ladies. It doesn't matter if, I lead a sober lifestyle, but people make their assumptions. So those are some of the myths, being well educated, having money, being a leader, being well known. That doesn't prevent a lot of these ladies from being murdered or missing. And the violence against our women is so high. And as you can tell from the Colin Bushy story, even if they admit to attacking one of us and murdering us, they get off free, they walk away for free. I think it was Cindy Gladue in Edmonton. She was murdered, and it was by a settler. He claimed that she agreed to having rough sex, but the sex was so rough that he created a 14-centimeter tear in her vagina. So I was wondering, how long is a 14-centimeter tear? And I think that's about the size of the width of my hand, from top to bottom, roughly. So that's a horrible tear. And during the courts, the ruling, or whenever they have, when they went to trial, they actually brought out her vagina. They cut out her vagina and they're showing it to the jury. So if this was a settler woman, would that have happened? So even in death, we're not safe. We're still cut apart and objectified. So that's another myth. Even in death, you're not safe, because then our bodies are just used as objects. So I don't mean to end on that awful note, but that's the only thing I can think of at the moment.
Thank you for sharing some of your stories. I know so many stories that sound just like that. I thought if I did A, B, and C, it would make me safe or safer. My family is from Prince George, which it's really, really, really rich it's a really cultural space. There's lots of food, there's lots of water, there's lots of rivers. But it's also kind of a really central vein for the Highway of Tears. So what we were just talking about is Highway 16. It's become known as the Highway of Tears because so many Indigenous women have gone missing. for lots of different reasons. Mostly it's hitchhiking, and a lot of the time it's folks who have been abducted and then are taken along that highway and are never seen again. So you see a lot, there's a huge lack in safety for Indigenous women who feel like they can be safe hanging out with friends, or feel like they can go to a party and feel safe, and that their body is safe, and that their spirit is safe. But there's a lot of lack of safety there, and I wonder what it feels like, and I've been really there's a lot of pulling in my heart these days because we're in an era of reconciliation. We're supposed to be giving each other love and showing each other how sorry we are and what we're going to do to make up for all of these wrongdoings, right? So what does reconciliation mean when there's no safety? There's no reconciliation when there's no safety. If one person is sitting there and they say, I know that the rate for me to experience domestic violence is 3 times higher than any other person or than any other woman in Canada, then there's a lack of safety. There's a piece missing there. So I'm interested to know what it might feel like for somebody that doesn't look like us, or somebody who doesn't have the values that we do, because I know that there are a lot of myths about the way that we should carry ourselves as Indigenous women. There's all this stuff about what we should be doing, kind of thing. But I think, I don't know, I think I want to know more about the truths about Indigenous women. I want to know more about, I want to know more about the cultural stuff, but sometimes it's really hard, especially in the work that I do surrounding violence towards women, because you hear so many of those truths that are so jarring that you don't even want to hear them anymore. And these are lived experiences that someone is choosing to share with you, and I love you for telling those stories. I love you for sharing those words and sharing your truth and saying, hey, you need to believe me because these are the things that have happened to me in the past 10 years. I can give you a whole bunch of examples, kind of thing. But I think that some of the truths that are going on in Canada and what we've been talking about and what people need to understand is that for me, as a visibly Indigenous woman, young person who's educated, person who's urbanized, all of those things, by the end of my education here at UVic, I have a group of 4 friends. One of us will experience sexual assault, and that's like 6 months away by the time I'm graduated. So it feels really, really, really difficult to know that in that group of friends, I already know 2. So like, we're not really beating the system here, guys. It's a really, really tough space to know the truths, because there's a lot of myths about how you can avoid it, but there's so many jarring truths that I want to share a little bit with you. So one way that I've found a voice where I can share some of those truths is through our campaign. We produced a video. This year we reached 1 million distributed pins, and so we made a video. We wanted to show everybody what we did, and we spent 1 minute of 8 minutes that the video's like this, just statistics, just 1 statistic, 2 statistics. We did it for 1 full minute. Here's what they read. Indigenous women are 6 times, the homicide rate against Indigenous women is 6 times more than the national average. Indigenous women are 3 times more likely to experience domestic violence. 25% of RCMP calls are domestic violence calls. 1 in 4 women experience sexual assault by the time they graduate in post-secondary institutions. These rates are likely much higher, since 70% of domestic violence calls are not reported. That's a toughie, because if you're basing all of this information and all these programs around what the statistics are, and 70% of it isn't being reported, then where are all those people? If you believe that there's 1,600 missing and murdered, but there are the remains of probably another 1,600 that we haven't found or haven't been looking for or don't know yet, then how does anybody know? We'll just keep kind of going on, re-perpetuating all of these ideas that it's much less than it actually is. My friend, Premier Doug Ford, is doing some ridiculous stuff and is taking on all of these, or is actually removing all of this Indigenous content. Is removing all of the sexual education, we're kind of reverting back to all of the old fun stuff. So it's, yeah, it's really, really hard to see stuff like Doug Ford being able to impose all of these ideologies on folks. Greyhound buses. Anybody know what's going on with Greyhound buses? Anybody want to say one thing? Do you know what's going on? Anybody? They're canceled? Yeah. So in a lot of northern communities, there's no way to get around. Seasonally, because there isn't road access, lots of different reasons. So Greyhound buses have canceled, I don't know how many routes.
All of the western, all western routes. Yes, I heard.
All western routes. So how are you supposed to get around? And if you live on Highway 16, am I going to be throwing out the hitchhiker's thumb? Probably not, or maybe I am, because I really need to get into town. So it's just, it's super disheartening to hear when folks are saying that those myths of women basically having to make all of these safeties for themselves, and just putting it into their policies and making it business and being like, well, we don't need to do this anymore, you can figure it out for yourself. It's really, really tough to hear. RCMP has a $1 billion lawsuit from their own female members coming forward. There's so many female members who are experiencing sexual assault and harassment. And I'm really proud to say that as something that I've been able to do to combat that really tough relationship between Indigenous women and the RCMP is to start, we're doing training online and in person and at the depot experiences for RCMP members to learn what the mission of the Moose Tide campaign is and to start wearing them on their uniform and to start being able to respond to those domestic violence calls a bit better. So I'm really glad for this question. I'm so happy for this question, and I thank you for asking it, and I think that there's a lot of truths that need to be shared and a lot of myths that needs to be debunked because we can't really do anything to kind of make safety for ourselves. What we can do is promote safety in different spaces, so we need to change those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. And yeah, thank you for having the courage to share your space and or share your story rather. And I feel like this is a really loving space. So it feels that hopefully that feels okay for you too. If I could just add before I ask the next question, if with your permission, since it's your question, may I give an answer as well? So one of the other myths that I've encountered in my work, working in the area of supportive housing, another myth is that if you're an Indigenous woman and you're in supportive housing, you're safe. And that's not true, that's a myth. For a year in the past, 2016 to 2017, we started what was called a Priority 1 task force, and we discerned who were the most vulnerable people. There were 74 of them. Who were the most vulnerable people on Victoria's streets, and what do they need so we can help them. And so we not followed them, but worked with them, monitored them for 1 year. And what we found is that even when 100% of the Indigenous women in that group, when they lost their housing, it was because of a violent partner. That is the reason they lost their housing. Nothing to do with them, because they had a violent, 100% of Indigenous women in that small group. And so the good news is we're now creating 21 units of supportive housing for Indigenous women run by Indigenous women. So that's, I guess, when we know what the myths are, we can actually address them with, as you say, with truths. And I really, Sage, take that so seriously. Without safety, there is no reconciliation. And these 21 units for Indigenous women run by Indigenous women, it's a tiny step. We need way more, but that, hopefully that's part of the safety and part of the reconciliation. So thank you for that wisdom that you shared. I'm going to now ask Sage's question. What are some examples of solution-based actions or policies that successfully promote cultural safety in your organization or in your workspace? And if it's okay, in the same way I did, I'll ask Sage, actually, if you could share some wisdom with us to answer your own question first.
Kind of an odd thing to do, but it's
Cool. Yeah, I just keep hearing you say it. It sounds really wordy, the question. What are some examples of solution-based actions or policies that promote cultural safety in your organization? So my organization is Moosehide. My organization is my family. That's a really, really unique space. It's a space that I'm so happy to be in. I invited one of my sisters to come here today, and she came here to support me in physical space and to just give me good love energy and be one of my sisters in what we do. So we work really, really hard to create deliverable solution-based actions. The solutions are different ways that we can engage lots of different groups, women's groups, boys groups in high schools, men who work in government, lots of different spaces. And the ailment is violence towards women and children. So what are those actions? We ask for two things. One, wear the pin. Find a pin, read the card, come to understand it, actually ask some questions, and if you believe in it, then you can believe in it, and you can read it, and you can better understand it. We have so many different ways that you can ask questions, but the pin itself is a sign of solidarity. It means you're willing to wear this super publicly, and just stand up and be proud about it, and say, I'm wearing this, and say, thank you for asking, I'm wearing this pin because I believe that women and children shouldn't experience violence in Canada, and that's why I'm wearing it. It's a really uncomfortable space, especially if you're in the line at Starbucks and Joe is like, hey, what's that? And you're like, hey, want to start a conversation about domestic violence this morning? It's a tough one to chew on, but it's super, super important, and it takes away all of that discomfort and all of that weirdness that so many people don't want to talk about and want to hide and not show and just put in their little shell and cover it up. And we don't want that to happen. We want it to be super loud and vibrant and out there because it takes over people's lives so often. So the second thing that we ask folks to do, I'm going to sit down. The second things that we ask folks to do as a part of our solution-based actions in our organization is to fast. So for the folks who have heard of Moosehide, what we do is we ask you to wear the pin, and then we have an event every year. And the key component of the event is that from when the sun rises till when the sun sets, you don't eat the whole day. And it's a small personal sacrifice. It hurts your tummy, and sometimes people get headaches and they're tired, and they're grumpy, and you don't want to do anything, and you don't want to work, and you start feeling your body, you start feeling your thoughts, and you really, really, really have to compose yourself and be present. and say, why am I doing this? It's a really, really, really small sacrifice that you can give. Sun up to sundown. In the winter, it's easier, but you can. It's something that we ask folks to do. We've done several. So we started in 2011. This year, we hope to have 5,000 folks fasting with us. That's a lot of people. And throughout the day, you think about what the intentionality is behind what you're doing. And we have a lot of men who feel shame and discomfort and anger and a lot of sadness in their heart because of the violence that they've experienced and that now they're re-perpetuating. And it's a really, really difficult space, but there's so much culture and there's so much life when you feel that just hunger and need to have support and love and energy given to you. People fast all around the world. I'm not saying that it's specific to Indigenous folks in Canada. People fast every day all around the world, and they do it for a reason. It is so, so, so helpful. And I know this because I've done several one-day fasts every year, but I also have done 3-day fasts, starting when I was 14 years old. And I went out in the middle of the forest and I built my own kind of space and fire and I did my own fast and I suffered. You suffer, and it's so hard, especially when you're 14. And they said, why are you doing it? I said, for my mom. And they're like, okay, why are you doing it for your mom? I was like, well, she is sad a lot. And they're like, okay, so why would you offer sacrifice because your mom's sad? Because if I sacrifice a little bit, that energy might go to her and she might feel better. Pretty simple concept, I guess. I give energy, she receives it. So we ask for that sacrifice in support because we know that it's something that everyone can do. It doesn't cost anything. It's one thing that you can commit to, you can prepare for, you can do it, and then you can reflect later. And I think that it feels really, really good to have that community later, to be able to say, I did this with you, and now we can go and do it again the next year or whatever. But I think it's like so important to do it with family, and like I'm so appreciative to have my sister here today and supporting me because I'm making a little sacrifice and she's giving back. So. Yeah, that's a really, really, really key example of a solution-based action that we believe. You give a sacrifice and you can help someone a little bit more and create that awareness. So everyone can receive a pin later. We'll be over there and I can talk to you a little bit more about it. And we have the video and all those fun things, but it feels really important just to have that spirit with you throughout the day.
So with Once Got Decolonized Victoria, I started it, I think, 6 years ago. And obviously it's Indigenous-led because I'm the leader. So I used to run these healing circles with settlers and non-natives. I stopped doing them about 3 years ago, not because of no interest, but because I was doing a national walk against lateral violence. I call it the Neo-Cheetah Walk, which is Cree for living in harmony together. That's Racelle coming.
Sorry, I got lost.
It's easy to get lost here. So with OneSCA, all the events are Indigenous-led because I'm the one that puts on the events. And right now it's an online supplement for those who want to decolonize. It's open to everyone. I'm definitely very, I have to use a bad word, but very Nazi about what comments are allowed on the site and what are not. I'm very strict. I won't even let the word damn be used. No swearing, no insults. And so it's very strict in that regard because it's a soft place for people to land who are settlers and Indigenous so that we can voice our opinions. yeah, with everyone who's like-minded and have the same opinion, but in everyday life, I know we're inundated with naysayers, so it's the one place where we can talk and share our beliefs in a good way. I also created the Worldwide Smudge. So I asked people around the world to smudge, and again, it's Indigenous-led because I'm the one leading it. So that's why I have no problem when settlers are participating in our ceremonies, providing that it's Indigenous-led. So I think settlers need to step back and let us do the leading. So it's awesome that this symposium started with us Indigenous ladies. Because back home, the elders say our nation has not fallen on us until the women's hearts are on the ground. So it's nice to see that the panel is all Indigenous women today, and so that means that our hearts are not on the ground, which means our nations have not fallen. And so I just think it's best to indigenize whatever it is we're doing, so whatever the organization, whatever territory they're in, you're going to obviously get people who fight over whose territory it's in. I mean, I was hearing of an event in Toronto that my friend went to, and there was, I think, I'm Kooy, so I'm just reporting with my other Kooy friends. So there was Kooy people who were insisting that this territory was ours, but then there were other Indigenous groups who were saying, no, this was our land before you Kooy came in. And I was like, well, I guess I believe that to be true. I mean, we aligned with the British, and so the British gave us guns. So I'm not very popular with my own people because my thinking is a little bit different, because we, in a sense, helped the colonizers, because as we moved west, we pushed the Blackfoot and the Dene out of their territories. And the Dene actually tell that story, and then another Blackfoot tell that story in Alberta, and then there's me being Cree saying, yeah, I believe them. So if we push those guys off in Alberta, then I'm sure we push off other groups too. So there is misunderstanding of which territory people are in, but I think it's to do your best, because if you do it with good intentions, then the really kind, forgiving people will be like, you tried. You know, those are the ones that you ally with. They're the ones who are a little bit more flexible. With my psychic business, I do a Native Psychic Fair. It's called a Native Mystical and Mystical Fair, or Native Mystical and Spirit Fair. Sorry, I'm messing up the name. But it's we open it with an opening ceremony, and so it's a huge learning experience for me, being Cree, that our ceremonies are so different from here. So the opening ceremony for the Native Psychic Fair is different. It's a blending of like the local Native group as well as my people's group, right? So, so even amongst us Aboriginal people, we have to like negotiate and try and figure out how to respect each other's cultures and spirituality, and because we have a shared experience, but we don't. Like, I know Carrier, where we are like considered cousins. I have a friend who's Carrier. She says us Korean and Carriers are cousins. And then with Racelle, I don't think we're cousins in just all my relations, but I don't know if we don't really share.
Really shoestring.
I also created the All My Relations Reiki, which is another Indigenous event where it's worldwide. We get it's predominantly Indigenous Reiki masters sending out Reiki energy to the world, and settlers who are Reiki masters, they too can send out energy and healing energy. So that is one way of making things Indigenous-led. I do get flack for blending in my traditional culture with, say, Reiki, which comes from Japan, but I'm like, well, the creator made me a Reiki master. I was homeless and I became a Reiki master, and I was like, well, why did the creator make me a Reiki master while homeless? So I needed to figure out what that meant, and I'm like, well, you know, no bolts of lightning, no thunderbirds are going to knock me down dead. So thunderbirds are the ones that with the lightning, that's where that comes from. So that's magic. So I'm still going to continue doing what I'm doing because it's not very popular. Indigenizing things, especially in the psychic community, they put up with me. But I'm like, no, you can't do readings in a teepee. You're not Indigenous. Like, they don't like me saying that. But I do readings in a teepee because my family use teepees, even at powwows. We use them all the time. So that's okay for me to use a teepee to do readings in. But I will call the non-natives out for colonizing my spirituality and trying to take it and sell it for their own use. So I am trying the best I can to re-indigenize things, and speaking out when settlers are overstepping their boundaries, which is really hard. But I remember 1997, I had a fight with my friend who was a settler, and we were talking about my culture and how I'm trying to be a good Indian, and what does that mean? And then she said I was colonized, and I said to her, well then from now on I'm going to decolonize. And she said, that's not even a word. And I was like, I don't care if it's not a word. Sure, it's in the dictionary, I'll look it up later, but I'm going to decolonize from this moment on. And that was in 1997. So I was decolonizing, I thought all by myself, only to find out that people have been doing it probably much longer than I have. And so I always try to promote people to decolonize, hence decolonize Wanska, decolonize Victoria. Hopefully it'll grow bigger, and I do want to bring back those healing circles. Hopefully people will be more honest, because unfortunately during the healing circles, it was like us Indigenous were taking care of the settlers' feelings. And if I said anything like, say, white privilege, I would get chastised by other Indigenous and saying I was being too harsh on the settlers, or calling me and telling me I was racist. And no, I'm fighting oppression and white supremacy, and the only way we can do that is by calling it out. So that's hard in itself. So, but I just stopped doing the circles because I was walking across Canada to bring awareness to violence. So, and now I want to bring it up again because people have been asking me. So if you guys came, it would be awesome. Because we would have a more honest talking circle. Are we going to let Racelle answer the question? Or?
Is it Sage's question?
Yeah, Racelle, do you want to introduce yourself first, and then, it's Sage's question, and we saved your question for when you arrived, so it's just perfect. So if you want to just start by introducing yourself.
I'm not a sitter. Racelle Kooy quest. Good day, everybody. My name is Racelle Kooy. I'm also known as Laloya, Racelle, and you're absolutely right. A whole chunk of my family calls me Racelle. And yes, we are shoestring cousins. I definitely welcome that, Isabel. I'm really honored to be here with all of you today. Please pardon my lateness. I was circling around UVic, looking for signage until I found I should stop and look at signs. And then I realized I drove past here multiple times. A really lovely tour of UVic. I'm really happy to be with you today. And so please, I didn't mean to offend anybody in being late. It's just being a little bit lost. So Racelle Kooy, I am from the largest nation in British Columbia. In fact, our name means spread out people, which is a Shawetma. That's the way I say it because I'm from the north. I've driven across our territory starting in Invermere, and I drove 800 kilometers until I got to where I was residing in our northernmost part, which is just north of Williams Lake. And I was residing in one of our home communities known as Hatsul First Nation. So we're the spread out people. Shawetma means spread out. English, you probably know us a little bit better as Shuswap. But I also carry the name Laloya. Laloya is an ancestral name. That name comes from my grandmother's people, and that's the Statlian people. So dipping down into Whistler area, all the way over to Lillooet, the place, which is also named after Lillooet, the people, which would be some of my elders and family members. So really happy to be with you today. Going to Sage's question, and thank you. I'm just going to somewhat underline what you said, Isabel, which is try hard, and what actually it was, embrace your ignorance. And I mean that in a really loving, kind way. When you're, be confident in your knowing and not knowing, and lean into that discomfort or the unknown. Because for us, when we take a moment to share, or if we're engaged in something, and you don't know, we don't know that you don't know. And so if you can say, hey, I don't know, and we can say, all right, and we can either take a time out, or you can make a note to yourself to look into that a little bit. There's so many great tools out there. So I would always say, for when it comes to policy, is really just be confident in your not knowing. And that sounds really weird, but I was just, my mother's doing a project with the Anglican Church right now with a whole reconciliation aspect. And it's involving the entire congregation, which is really cool in the art project. And it was really lovely to sit down with the pastor, at least I think that's what they call pastor, I'm not sure, I'm not Anglican, but with let's call her the pastor. And for her to just be really confident and clear, but also express what she had no idea what I was talking about. So then I could confidently invite her in and have her be part of it. I mean, there's lots of things that we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to be listening today, that I'm not going to know about, and I'm happy to learn and admit my ignorance and make some notes for myself to do some follow-up work for myself. Like, this whole gender identification was not something that I was familiar with 2 years ago, but I really embraced that. So I embraced the unknown. I learned how to say side gender, you know, and things like that. So that's part of my learning curve too, because I'd say it's just a place of moving from there. And we have Rose here. Shall I pass the microphone over to her unseen expression, but you wanted to say hello?
Hello, everybody. I do apologize for being late. Because, you know, the BC Ferries has this way of coming in on its own time. I'm like, it's coming in on a late time. I always tell people that, you know, they always say that about Indian time. Indian time is on time because of the way the hunting season and berry picking season is. We always have to be on time. So our time goes in accordance to when our Mother Nature says it's time to do things. But, you know, I just rolled in off the ferry after spending the night up on Burnaby Mountain. We still haven't gotten eviction action yet, besides having the notice and everything. The notice makes great covering papers. But, you know, it's like all the people up there, it's kind of like the world is there with the unity of so many different people from all different cultures. And our one common ground is about protecting the mountain and saying no, trying to get our elected leaders to say no to a pipeline. And guess who's on the front lines? It's the women. We're there. I'll talk to you guys in a little bit about my little workshop.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Rose, and welcome, Racelle. So we have to, I've been given strict instructions that we need to wrap up at 20 after. It's white person's time, for sure, settler time. I apologize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Racelle and Rose's questions together, and then I'll invite each person to answer whichever aspect of whichever questions they wish to. So Racelle's question is a really powerful question. How do we handle hate? The Secwepemc Nation's public stewardship work, as represented by signage around the Morrow mushroom harvest, was vandalized by white supremacist messaging. For those of us directly targeted, what actions should we take? For allies, what are some concrete ways to step up? And Rose's question is, how do we transform our power to encourage youth to create a brighter future? How can we shift from adult leadership and hand the reins to our youth and support them? So those are all the thoughts that are being put out as questions. And maybe I'll just pass the microphone down the row and people can respond to whichever aspects of those that they wish.
I don't know, how much time do we have? About 1 minute
Okay, I'm trying. As I mentioned earlier, I do get a lot of hate, so this is like a good question for me. I'm still struggling with this. I'm a very spiritual person. I mean, I started wearing my skirt every day 20 years ago. So I use prayer. I pray to the Creator to take that hate and put it into a safe place, far, far away, never to hear it from again. And ask the Creator to fill me up with love. Not to say that I'm speaking very lovingly to the person who's, sending hate my way, but I do try and I fail all the time. So to deal with hate, I remind myself, oh, I must be doing something right. If I'm getting such a strong reaction, then I must be doing something right because I'm shaking things up. I see myself as very mild-mannered and very soft-spoken and can be a doormat. So for me to get somebody so riled up out of speaking, which is, to me, is just normal, just being normal, I think I'm doing something right. And I also think of it like I can't change that person, but somebody who is watching is learning. So whatever comments I make, I'm making it for those who are watching so that they can learn what needs to be learned. Because unfortunately, I really don't believe that someone who hates that much is going to change. So the conversation I have with those who are hating or the naysayers, even I don't want to call them haters, I call them the naysayers, so that those who are watching can learn from that. So then to speak with facts and figures and stick to the facts, because it's really, I mean, we can argue against the facts, that's fine, but people who are observing the conversation, they really respond to facts, and somebody trying really hard, I think, to be respectful and kind is hard, but it can be done. Hopefully one day I'll achieve that.
Maybe Rose will answer your question. So how do we encourage youth to create a brighter future and hand over the reins to our young ones? So I guess I'm the butt end of that. I'm the young one. So I was talking to my partner earlier. He's the one taking the pictures over there for me. So he told me that it was really, really important to note how much privilege I've experienced as like living in an urban place where I had a lot of opportunity, and my parents worked in the French Extension movement, and I had so much opportunity to learn, and there was so much community there, and all the elders were always constantly just grabbing my cheeks and telling me pieces of advice that I didn't understand, and so I got a lot of experience and practice, and I just got to go through the motions. Okay, now we go to the AGM, now we learn this, now we do this, and so I got a lot of practice from a really young age, and now that I'm just kind of coming out of college, it's like, I know like the back of my hand. So there's something really, really important in practice, I think. My dad always says, practice, practice, practice. That's all he says. I'm like, how do I do this? And he goes, practice, practice, practice. And he doesn't give any advice, he doesn't say anything else. So I think what's really important, and I can't, the reason why I say that is because I can only speak from my own lived experience. I can't tell anyone to do anything else because I don't know. But what I can say is that in my experience, I was nurtured to learn that all you can do is just go through the rhythm until you're comfortable to speak in front of a whole bunch of people, and then hopefully you can make a difference. And like as a young person, I feel really proud to be able to make some difference. So yeah, thank you, Rose, for that question.
So we can take this ugly thing off, but just before we do, this is with the wildfire season that happened last year in the thick of our territory. I was one of those evacuees. I was evacuated on my territory for 40 days last year. Now, we know that out of the fire comes many things, and out of the fire comes a booming morale mushroom year. So we knew that, so we prepared for that. Like you talked about, Rose, we know when is the right time, right season, the right aspect. So our leadership worked with the BC government and put out a permitting system to educate, inform, ensure safety and well-being. And that's what was vandalized. It's this really loving way to invite people into our territory and participate in the stewardship so that we could all benefit. And the response was that, fuck Indians, white is right, enough already, all that crap. And I just want to, I'm putting voice to it because it exists. Because it exists. Do I like to bring attention to it? No. But do I need to? Yes. Why? Because if we don't say that's wrong, as you said beautifully, if we don't say no, and I know Isabel personally, and I'm so honored and proud of the work that she does. She steps into those really uncomfortable places all the time. I don't know Rose so well, but I do see her out and about, and she steps into these really, she has been one of those warriors leading the charge for a very long time. So it's really lovely when other people step forward. Can you go to the next slide, please? There we go. Oh. And I really want to share this with you, which is the memorial to Sir Wilfrid Laurier. So a lot of the work has been done. My ancestors, with, you might have heard of James Tate. If you know anything about Indigenous history, you know that James Tate was a non-Indigenous man who was an incredible ally. He had a First Nations wife. He was an incredible ally that worked with us greatly, and he penned this. Basically, he brought voice to the chiefs of the area to send a letter to Sir Wilfrid Laurier. And there's, if you write this down and Google it, you're going to learn a whole bunch about a big cross-section of British Columbia. If we go to the quote, please. The next one. There we go. I'm really, really, really close to it. I don't have it memorized. Excuse me as I get close to you. With us, when a person enters our house, he becomes our guest, and we must treat him hospitably, as long as he shows no hostile intention. At the same time, we expect him to return us equal treatment for what he receives. Some of our chiefs said, these people wish to be partners with us in our country. We must therefore be the same as brothers to them and live as one family. And it goes on, and what I love is, we will help each other to be great and good. So the part that I can't stand is that everybody thinks there's this pie, that if you get a chunk of the pie, I go without, or you go without, or people without. We don't understand that when we manage it, we can expand the pie and grow the pie and screw the pie. Who needs a pie? We just manage it to make it something else. Do you know what I'm saying? So this is the part for me when I think about that aspect, is how do we carry that forward in a good way? How do we move that forward in a good way? So that we can be great and good. And I just have two tiny little things for Rose's, I love the question. Of course you'd ask that question, Rose. She's always busy engaging people. Is mentorship, be it in formal exchanges or formalized processes. You know young people around you. You know when you have an affinity with somebody, even in the moment, just that awareness of other around you when someone's paying attention to you. If there's an opportunity to exchange, there's an opportunity to make it a little bit formalized, whether it's your circle of family or friends or dear ones. I have a lot of honorary nieces and nephews that I really take that role of auntie very seriously. And I think that that's a great role. The other thing I would say is offering to help, but following up with that. Because sometimes people, you know, when you're young, you feel shy. And you feel shy like, well, I don't want to impose, I don't want to push on you, I don't want to, and I really, but you're, you know, I'm an auntie, I'm an old lady, look at me, oh, I don't know what to take her from, but if I offer, I'll offer again, because then it gets the idea, it's actually there, that help is there. And then being of service in a way that fosters interactions. I know when I was working at the First Nations University of Canada, we had feeding circles at lunch hours. And that was the most incredible exchange that happened for people to be able to just, you know, we'd have our kia'as, our grandmothers come in and sit down with them and they'd be teaching, but they're grandmotherly types, the auntie types. And then, you know, as they beat and they're being creative, well, you know, there's this thing with this guy or this girl and it's kind of bugging me, or I'm kind of interested, or I'm really, you know, that opportunity for those exchanges, or, you know, or driving them somewhere, like if they need to get to the ferry, get picked up from the ferry, or you know, if you're cooking for a feast or some sort of gathering, helping out so that, you know, that same thing of when you're doing those activities, conversation flows. So that would be what I'd have to share on that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you for sharing. I'd like everyone to give a big round of applause for our
Rose, get an question.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Rose, please speak very briefly.
You're asking a First Nations elder to speak very briefly. This is a part of, you know, Rose turning 60 this year, and the one thing I asked people, I said, for my 60th birthday was a revolution, and this is how it begins. Because, you know, over the years I've gone to many different events as, you know, as a supporter, as a speaker, and now over the last few months, people have started to call me Grandma. I am their auntie. And over the years, I found out that, you know, a couple of my nieces had followed in the tracks that I was laying, that I didn't know I was laying. One of them is Takaya Balaney. And so with Takaya, from the time she was 10, and now she's 17, her and I have now gone on and we've spoken at different events, different, you know, board AGMs, things like this. Well, our common ground was, besides having the same family lineage, was also that we both met each other literally at a pipeline protest in Comox. And the first thing she said to me, she said, I have been watching you since I was 6 years old. And I'm like, wow, okay. And, you know, so it was through her conversations that, you know, I thought about this, about how do we get kids involved? Because over the years I've seen less and less children at rallies and more senior citizens at rallies. When in the years that I've been talking about social justice, that it is our children that are going to inherit the earth as we leave. And it is our children who will be taking the reins. So how do we do this? You know, how do we transfer things? But you know, when we see signs like what was just up there, those are signs that I'm seeing everywhere. I just came from Burnaby Mountain, where there's a lovely sign identical to that one. Tent City, I've witnessed it in Nanaimo, and here in Victoria, and in Delta. You know, so people are really quick to like express their anger and their rage and their, you know, unsettled emotions about what is going on in the world, as long as it's instant right now, but they don't want to hear the answers, they don't want to learn. So how do we start teaching people that what they're doing right now is wrong? We start teaching them from the time that they're little.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you very much to all of you for the wisdom that you shared. It's been an honor to be able to sit here on the stage with you, and I'm very, very grateful to all the work that you're doing, and hope that I and the rest of the settlers in the room can learn to be allies and to always improve our allyship. So thank you very much, and sorry for going over time, but that's just how it goes.